Hello. Welcome to another video. In this video we're playing some dirty fighting. I know it's been a little bit since my last video. I want to say like a week plus now. I've been playing a lot of WoW, so forgive me. It's not because I don't have interest in this game, it's just that, you know, I've been busy with other things over quite a bit. And I just haven't found myself wanting to play this game as much. We jump on and play some games with my friends, but really all we did was play combat together, and that was really about it. All those games were relatively boring because there was just nobody really to fight, so don't really have any footage for that. So I'll probably play some more of that eventually. I don't really know what classes to play currently. Kind of just waiting for 7.6. See like what happens there. I think they'll probably do another live stream, I think they said. I don't know, I haven't really been paying it too much attention. That's not really it's not really something that I like to keep track of as much anymore, mostly just because the state of the game has just not been in a state that I've been able to enjoy the game as much. And I think a lot of other people can agree with me, you know, ever since they allowed 8-mans to be a thing. The game has gradually just started decaying, which is very bad. Obviously this is not as big of news as everything else, but for the most part the gearing changes are cool. I do want to get max item level, but at the same time it's just, I'm not really a raider, so raiding's just not for me. So I'm just more so thinking like, hey, eventually I could casually get max gear just from doing a lot of PvP and conversion exchange, but ultimately it's still a crazy grind, and for the most part I can't imagine what it's like for like new players or just players that are just trying to get into the game in general. So for example, let's say if you just didn't understand modded and you just refused to bother, if you have like what 14 different gear slots, 3 or 2 of them you have to, actually no, it is 3, so it would be what 15 if you include your tactical. 3 of those slots you have to get through tech fragments, like purely pretty much, which is kind of annoying, and for the most part it's completely understandable. I do wish that, you know, maybe upgrading implants was not really a thing required for PvP. I'm sure there's a way that they could get around that, so PvP felt more, I guess, inclusive for those players that didn't want to sit there and grind forever. And then on top of that, for each individual slot outside of that, you have like what, 5 upgrades or 6 upgrades or something like that. That's kind of a lot for a lot of people to like try to get into this game. You know, times that by, what is it, the 12 slots that they would have to constantly upgrade. That's quite a bit. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't want to do that, and I completely understand why. A lot of people just don't have gear, and if they do have gear, it's, you know, just whatever they've gotten from the random content they've, you know, done. Unfortunately, a lot of this random content is just not very rewarding in gear. Conquest gear is not very good. If you didn't know that, now you do. Please try to avoid your conquest gear or your green gear, basically. Try to avoid it. Try to avoid your blue gear. All of this stuff is HP heavy, and it'll take away tertiary stat from you, and it'll also take power away from you. 9 times out of 10 it's not worth it to use it. Typically the PvP gear and the purple gear is what's going to be more focused on damage and more into like power and mastery, and that's kind of like what you're looking for because that's your damage stat. That's most important. For tanks, this is not as important. For healers, it's super important, and obviously damageable. So do keep that in mind. If you do happen to be a tank, it's not as important, but obviously if you want to do damage, you want to optimize your power and your mastery. But then on top of that, your tertiary stat is very important. You only get so much of that, and if you're using something that's heavier on like HP, chances are you're going to miss out on some of that. Not much of it, but you're going to miss out on some of it. Also, another thing to think about too is like the augments. Augments are a complete bane, and it definitely hurts like the entry for new players into PvP. Adding a bolster just to give us like 14 mastery augs for each slot that we're missing. So for example, if we're missing all 14 augments, you know, just give us 14 blue mastery augs worth of stats on top of the stats that we already have, and bam, you know, the whole augment issue is kind of evaporated instantly, which is very nice. Obviously, there's still progression for getting the purple augments and the gold augments, which is really good. Not getting rid of progression there, but also at the same time. While gear progression is kind of important for PvPers, typically most PvPers just want to see progression in skill. They don't really care about gear. They don't really care about a lot of the things that it seems that some people are caring about nowadays. That's not really something that an actual PvPer cares about. If you're a hardcore PvPer or you play rated like in any sort of like capacity, chances are, yeah, gear matters for you progression wise, but the real improvement is how much better of a player you become. And most people are that way, some people aren't. I totally understand. You know, having incentives to play is very important. It's the main reason I got into PvP. The main reason I PvP now is just because it's fun, it's something to do. I enjoy it. And then obviously getting better is also one of the main motivations. I like to see personal progression, I guess you could say. Because personal progression in PvP is the main thing that you have to work for through multiple expansions, while in PvP it's much more simplistic, I guess you could say, because sure, you could probably master a lot of these operations the first time, and you go into another expansion and you redo them, there's not much difference, right? It's just, you know, optimizing your damage and optimizing your gear. That's about it. And it gets stale, at least in my opinion. Then obviously I know playing with different people, regardless, playing with people, in my opinion, just makes the game better. If you have to play with other people to make the game good, games probably arguably not that good. Anyway, that aside, I wanted to talk about what do you call it? The new Directx. I think that's what we were thinking about. So Directx 9 is kind of like how this game is running for the most part. If you don't have Directx 9 installed, which by the way, I highly recommend it, what you would do is find the Directx 9 files. They even have it on the Star Wars forums. It's very important for your performance. So the main reason why you would even want this, yes, you already have Directx installed, and yes, the latest version will emulate Directx 9. And yes, it seems like you probably wouldn't need it. However, emulation is not perfect, and having the actual files on your computer will allow you to gain a little bit more performance, especially when it comes to enhanced shadows and just shadows in general. So if you want to get that, I would definitely recommend Directx 9. Search that up on Google with Swtor, and you most likely will find the forum post and a link to Directx 9 from Jackie, which is very important. Once you've downloaded and installed that, obviously make a folder for it, extract all the files in there, and once you open that folder, you can find something called DX setup. That's what you want to run, and that'll install Directx 9 for you. Once you have that, you're pretty much set to go. There's not much else to it. And I totally could have killed this guy if I just used my hemorrhaging blast, but I just didn't want to risk him not, or it missing and him surviving and knocking me instead. But I just wanted to play it safe there. Didn't realize the time. Anyway, obviously having that is really nice, and I think we're going to like Directx 12 or something crazy like that. I don't keep track of all that, mostly because the newest Directx 9 really will take a lot of work on their side to make it better. Inherently, it probably will be quite a bit better, but at the same time, it will fundamentally, moving forward, require a lot of work for it to basically do the most that it can. So without them doing a lot of work to it, it's not going to be great. It could even have more issues than performance gain. But at the same time, if they spend a lot of work and they try really hard with it, it could be super good. So definitely take it with a grain of salt. It's not the solution for like the performance issues in this game. And when it comes to performance issues in this game, you're looking at buffs and debuffs and animations in general. So for example, elemental convection lightning sorcerer is a huge problem, and when it comes to, let's say, popping polarity shift during that, especially if you have high alacrity, you're able to get a lot of chain lightnings off. So what happens when a chain lightning goes off? It will 0.5 second root everybody, and on top of the 0.5 second root, it will also apply a slow. So that's a lot of debuffs immediately going out constantly by chain lightning. Now on top of that, if you have dots on people, you're basically constantly reapplying 3 debuffs all the time when you're popping chain lightning. It's a lot of lag and it's a lot of stuff for the game to load, including the players. So when you pop polarity, it goes even more crazy. Throw in a predation or like another .aoe spec. That's where your frame rate really starts to drop. It's a whole bunch of burst-ish kind of like classes in a match. You can immediately tell the difference between the frame rate. Obviously, if all the burst players are hitting their buttons really fast and just constantly hitting a GCD and not missing a GCD, obviously it'll still have bad hits on your performance, but at the same time you'll still be in a better spot than it would be compared to like 8-man chain lightnings or like 8-man searing waves and stuff like that. That's where things really get crazy. Yeah, even in like slam spam, like you can immediately notice when somebody's starting to slam spam, like your frame rate will instantly drop. There's a lot of buffs and debuffs, there's a lot of animations just constantly going. Having a way to turn down animations, I don't know if that would be possible if the new Directx 12 or whatever is coming out. It could be a possibility, and I think it's something that would be worthwhile for performance. However, you know, it's not the be-all end-all. It's not what's going to probably fix the performance issues, but it's definitely going to help. I do think on top of just, you know, having that, just pruning some of the buffs and debuffs in general would probably help. So for example, the accuracy debuff, really it has no place in PvP, and it doesn't really have much of a place in PvP as far as I know. Like it might have some niche uses for like trash mobs and whatnot, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't work on bosses, so I really don't see a reason for them to have it. So getting rid of that would be like one less debuff to have to deal with. And maybe with chain lightning, you know, it is quite a long time that it's worked the way it does, but maybe get rid of the arcing AoE route. Maybe just have it root the first target or the main target or whatever instead. That would really help in general, just dealing with lightning source, and in general also just dealing with like balancing for the class. I feel like elemental convection is really good, and a good elemental convection lightning sorcerer is a complete night and day difference between a bad one when it comes to AV8s, and it is definitely one of the top tier specs, and it's pretty much always been a top tier spec just because of that. Obviously when lightning wasn't doing too great, it was definitely just not that good. Thinking like 2.0. And when it comes to just like AoE in general, it's like a lot of these AoEs just don't need to do like 6 different things all at the same time and apply that to 6 different players or 8 different players times 6. It's a lot of debuffs going off all at once, and it's really nasty for your frame rate. So for example, another bad one that's really going to tank your frame rate sometimes is if somebody is using the incendiary missile like explosion spread, and you've got a whole bunch of people stacked up in one spot. You put that on somebody and then you pop your steering wave, you can literally see the stutter in your frames instantly as that thing is popped. I played it myself. You can see it in some of my pyro videos when I'm actually running that. You can see the negative frame rate impact that it has, and you can see the stutter. It's more so like a frame stop for a split second is weird. Basically what that means is that you get a 1% low. So usually the game will be like the smoothness. The game smoothness basically will be determined by your 1% low FPS. Your 1% low FPS is usually determined by when the laggiest moments happen. What is your frame rate? How far does it drop? So when the laggiest moment actually happens, your frame rate doesn't actually drop that much. The game will look very smooth. Even if you've had like a low 1% of like 30 FPS or 20 FPS or something like that, as long as it's not going under like 20, the gameplay is still going to look relatively smooth, especially for videos. But when you don't have things optimized and it goes all the way down to like 5 FPS, 4 FPS, 10, basically 10 or below, that's where you start seeing stutters and things don't look smooth, and the game just doesn't feel smooth. Because once you've basically seen a 5 FPS or below 10, like you kind of instantly like see that the game looks choppy and it's not going to look right, especially if you're constantly getting 1% lows that are that low. So when it comes to like optimizing, it isn't always about just getting the most FPS. It's more so about being able to consistently keep your FPS lows high. That makes sense. And one way to achieve that obviously is downloading DirectX 9. That'll help you, and then obviously optimizing other settings. I know for a long time this game was not recognized as a video game for me, and I could not always get full usage out of my CPU slash GPU at the time. I don't really have that issue anymore, but if you're having that issue, obviously make sure that your graphic settings is set. So for example, if you have Windows, you can go to graphic settings and you can set this game to high performance. If it's not set to that, I highly recommend it. Obviously for power settings, you know, it's another thing. Typically, as long as you're not in power saver mode, you're good. You don't really need to go to high performance. It's just, you know, an option. Balance plan is probably the way to go. And as long as the game understands that, you know, our computer understands that this is a game, then you pretty much should be able to draw full performance out of your GPU and CPU. That was a really big issue for me for a really long time, and my CPU would basically underclock itself, and my GPU would also do that. Obviously for GPU it's not as important, but GPU is kind of overkill for this game. But nowadays it's a little bit different because, you know, 64-bit, things are a little bit better. Anyway, this game's coming to an end. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.